Engage for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.
Hello and welcome to Engage for Success Radio and show number 585 in our weekly series. Engage for Success is a not-for-profit movement and the UK's leading voice on the topic of employee engagement. We're out there raising awareness and running events through our area networks right across the country, and our topic and sector-specific thought and action groups are developing research, publishing case studies, and highlighting all the best practice that's going on out there. Now, to find out more, please visit engageforsuccess.org. And while you're there, why not sign up for our weekly newsletter so you never miss out on any of our excellent free resources, events, and updates. And I'm Andy Gorham, your host for today's show and the founder of BizJuicer, the employee engagement and culture change consultancy that helps growing organizations become stickier from the inside out by helping them attract, keep, and develop great people. Now then, today, we're diving into the fascinating intersection of AI, talent strategy, and the economy. And we're going to explore how these forces are reshaping the world of recruitment and workforce planning. Now, businesses everywhere face a landscape that seems to change constantly, and many of us are still wrestling with some tough questions about the role technology will play in our future. And, if we're honest, some of us are still a bit baffled by the whole thing. And so joining us today is Matt Burney, Senior Strategic Advisor at Indeed, who brings over 20 years of expertise in recruitment, talent strategy, and technological innovation. Matt, who is recognized as a global speaker on this topic, guys, is also known for his ability to simplify complex topics into actionable insights and practical strategies. Now, that is something that will be very helpful when it comes to today's topic. So, what on earth is going on in the merry world of AI right now? How well are we adopting it and adapting it to what we actually need it to help with? What's the real relationship between economic trends, talent planning and hiring? And crucially, what should we really be doing to plan and hire more effectively as we look to the future? Matt, welcome to the show. Great to have you here, my friend.
Thanks, Andy. Good to see you.
I think I'm underplaying it when I say some of us are baffled by this whole thing. I'm really hoping you can shine some lights for us today. Before we get started, perhaps a bit of a better intro into you. Just give us a little bit about who you are, what's your background, and all that kind of good stuff.
So I've been in the world of recruitment for, I think it's 26 years,
Ooh.
which is probably giving away my age a little bit there. But yeah, I've been in the world of recruiting for a really long time. I was there at the early days of job boards and have moved around from running job boards and working with job boards through to being the other side of the table and running very large, complex recruitment and change processes, most notably at G4S. I was there for quite a long time when they were still the largest private employer in the world, so no small challenge there. And now, as you said, I'm a senior strategic advisor at Indeed, which means really that I am quite privileged. My job is essentially thought leadership. So, I have to spend, and a thought leader is such a term to throw around, isn't it?
Take it though, own it.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I feel a bit, we all feel a bit of a fraud when we say things like that. But it is expressly my job, to actually spend time looking at market trends, looking at technology, really trying to understand what's going on with employers, and then kind of sharing that on stage at events and doing things like this, PR and podcasts and all sorts of stuff. It's quite an odd job that I have, but I'm very privileged to have it.
That's fantastic. It's nice that someone's out there actually thinking rather than just doing all the time. It's a nice thing. Let's jump straight in because I think there's a lot to cover here. I don't know how deeply or how much we'll get into it, but let's make a start. It does feel to me that AI is pretty much everywhere. But it seems particularly in that world of hiring, or maybe it's just who I'm speaking to at the moment. I don't know. I do feel at times, though, that I'm absolutely nowhere near understanding what's actually going on, though. So what is going on in that world right now? What should I be looking at? From your perspective, my friend, what are the big things we should take note of?
Well, if we look at the world of recruitment and HR at the moment, it's fairly obvious that adoption is here. If you look at the CIPD research from last year, It was, I think, 62% of UK HR leaders said they were either piloting or adopting AI in some form or another.
Mm-hmm.
But there was only 18% of that 62% who said they'd actually integrated it into core recruiting processes. So there's obviously a disconnect going on here. And I think we are seeing people kind of going for the low-hanging fruit to an extent. And there's kind of, to an extent, nothing wrong with that. Because we do need to address those problems of where we are in terms of manual processes that should be automated, where we should be seeing change. The things like sending emails, sifting candidates, CV passing, writing job ads. All of that stuff is the kind of low-hanging fruit that we kind of expect everybody to do.
Yeah.
The problem is really that this isn't actually new. I've been talking about AI for over a decade. So this is not really any longer science fiction, but it is kind of spreadsheet logic with a bit of a god complex. And that's a little bit worrying, really. What we're seeing is that the infrastructure and adoption weren't ready in 2013, 2014. What's different now is computer power, user interfaces, have kind of made it real for people, and those models are out there. The challenge, I think, for a lot of people is knowing where to start.
Yeah.
It's actually knowing whether they've got the right thing in place at the moment. There are lots of low barrier to entry things that I think people should be using and are using broadly in recruitment. But we had a bit of, I guess, magpie syndrome in the world of recruiting. We always do, right? With people who like new technology a lot. And
Something shiny is great. Let's
yeah,
get it.
yeah, it's brilliant, and we all kind of rush out and we go, great, we're going to go and adopt this. And I think the adoption curve is really steep in the world of recruitment and talent more broadly. I think the problem is that the models that we have at the moment and the way that we understand AI moves so rapidly. There was initial let's all go and adopt stuff, but then it's kind of where do we go from here, I think, is the bigger question. And that's where we've seen some slowdown in adoption, particularly in the UK compared to other countries. I talk to a lot of people who are in talent, employer branding, all sorts of things, and they kind of don't know where to go, and the overcomplication has become a bit of a problem for a lot of people. I spoke to someone literally this week who was telling me, and she works for a very large tech company, was telling me that she had a training tool that was sent out to her, which was how to use the AI product that they've got to go and help enhance her job. Great. The problem was that she watched the video and didn't actually understand what the video was trying to tell her. So she had to go back to their own internal AI tool to get it to decipher what the AI tool was telling her to do. And I think that's a common experience for people at the moment.
That's mad. That's meta. That's the AI explaining what the AI is for to the AI. Marvelous. That is brilliant.
Yeah, it's a bit worrying. I think the tech has actually caught up with the hype. The people part is the bit that's still playing catch up at the moment, and I think that speaks very much to the skills problem, and the fact that we need to look at how we use and shape and get the best from kind of AI.
I wanted to ask you about that because, I mean, you've sort of just described the whole, just from the kit perspective, we've got people who've bought Ferraris and don't know how to drive effectively at the moment. So we've got that going on. You just mentioned the skills gap. Now, whether you're talking about workplace generations or you're talking about hiring, whatever, there's a lot of chat around an emerging skills gap heading our way at the moment. I'm going to ask some daft questions. Maybe is this gap real? I mean, have you got like insight to back up that this gap is going to be real, or are we looking at it from the wrong angle? Are we misdiagnosing what's really going on? And where does AI play a part in looking at the skills gap? Is it analysing what's going on within businesses? Is it helping on the recruitment? I've no idea. These two things must come together at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a skills gap, and we've already seen some data around that. We had the CBI and ONS actually talking about the cost of the skills gap
Mhm.
and retraining last year. So it was around about September last year. They identified something like, I think it was 275 million loss in productivity due to a skills gap.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, it's not really going away. So it's not just a lack of skills, it's kind of a more of a lack of strategic talent mobility and visibility. I think that's probably one of the problems that we have. The skills gap is kind of like an overwhelming force we can't really stop.
Mm.
And we've kind of locked our best troops to fight it away in the wrong part of the map, if you like. Um, so we probably need to start rethinking a lot of the way that we look at stuff. We're over relying on CVs, degrees, job titles,
Mm.
that kind of paradigm that we've been working in for a really long time. If we take a job title and a job description and we kind of smash that against somebody who's got that job title previously and who sort of has that job description in their CV, that's kind of worked, but it kind of also doesn't work in some ways.
Mm.
I think we need to help by using AI to start inferring skills from experience, surfacing those kind of adjacent roles, creating more dynamic skills taxonomies, just so we're not actually missing capability and missing potential. I think we've probably got the skills, but we're not having the right kind of imagination about where we could go with that. We're not necessarily looking at mapping in the right way, and we're not considering what mobility really looks like. Um, so I think AI can help us find the skills that we're probably not even looking for right now. We just need to know how to ask the right questions, if you like.
So
Um,
you think we're a little bit too beholden to this is gonna sound daft, the old world of roles. Oh, I had a role, there's no longer somebody in it, I now need to put somebody in that same role, and we're not really thinking about actually what skills have we got in the business? What skills do we require in the business in the future? How many of those can we grow organically? How many of those do we need to buy in? Is that the sort of flip that we're talking about rather than just I've got these roles?
yeah, I think there is an underlying problem there.
Yeah.
It's how many times, I mean, you and I have been around the industry long enough to kind of probably have encountered this conversation many, many times. Is the CV fit for purpose?
Mm.
Um, we're still having that conversation.
Still.
Yeah, and it's probably never going to change, right? Um,
Yeah.
there's there is that disconnect there, and just simply saying, "Here's the job and here's the person," that's okay. But if we start thinking as businesses, well, what skills do we need right now? What skills do we have in our business? And what skills do we need to go and build the business of the future? And if we start mapping all of that and then thinking that our expectations around recruitment are more about finding those skills for the future
Mm.
and skills for productivity, we can do a lot better. A lot of this comes back to things like education and the way that we're looking at budgets for training and things like that. It's not just, when somebody comes into the workforce, though there is a problem there. We've kind of confused education with certification and training with onboarding. We've got a problem there. If you look at L&D budgets, they went down post-COVID.
Mm.
1 in 3 UK companies got rid of or reduced their L&D budgets and never reinstated them. That's pretty bad. And if you look at adult learning participation, we're 20th out of 27 OECD countries. So if we're thinking about skills for the future, we've also got to support learning. We've got to support what goes on from a training perspective. And as businesses, we kind of have to think about not just ourselves, but the wider community, the wider culture. Because if we train people well, we look at skills in the right way, we're going to develop economic and social opportunity for people. And I think that's a really, really important element that we kind of need to be thinking more broadly than just, I've got a job and I need to fill it. That's not a great way of working. Though undoubtedly we need to do it, we probably need to be thinking about how we develop that as a way to recruit.
I think there's this thing, isn't there, around have we got the right skills, or are we just going to chuck a load of grunt at it and we'll have lots of people doing it? I think I heard you talk about I think you used the parallel of Warhammer 40,000 to kind of explain this
Yeah.
this issue. If you haven't heard this, this is genius. Just elaborate on that for me, Matt.
Well, there's this. I'm sorry, I'm a terrible nerd, and I still like Warhammer.
No, let's do it.
But there is this amazing idea that technology and society breaks down to the point where nobody actually knows how to fix anything because they spent so long just allowing the machine to do it for them. And rather than actually developing technology, you just throw bodies at the problem because
Yeah,
bodies are cheaper than actually building new technology. And you'd actually have to go and learn something if you went and built new technology. And it is kind of a worry, right? That's the GDP per capita problem. We've got declining GDP per capita in the UK. And I think when we look at that kind of thing, we're benchmarking performance on headcount,
mm,
not on output or skills leverage. So, the global workforce is a kind of dynamic thing, but talent strategies, I think, have become quite static. So there's a real tension there. That kind of disconnect between what's going on here. Hiring's become quite reactive. Workforce planning is arguably under-resourced. Economic literacy is patchy at best, I think, probably.
And
Um,
what do you mean by that? Is that the hiring managers, the recruitment officers, whatever it is, having a handle on what's actually going on commercially
yeah,
behind the scenes?
yeah, I think that's something that I've spent years talking about, and I think the kind of economic illiteracy around the people problem is the
Mm,
kind of central thing here. Um, and it's not my quote; it was Ali Galani, who is now retired, actually, who said at an event. When you go and have a meeting with the C-suite, everybody else turns up with an Excel spreadsheet, and we in HR and talent turn up with a PowerPoint. And that's kind of the problem here. Is we've all heard the do more with less, that this kind of the mantra of recruitment. It's not really changed every year. I hear the same thing. But if you can't have that kind of conversation about this is the value that we provide, this is why we are the engine that is driving this business, and I'd argue that people in talent really are that. They are driving that business. If
mm,
they don't identify the right skills, the right talent, the people that are going to drive the business forward, then the business fails. But too often they are looked at as the people that don't need as much money, they don't need as much resource, and there is underinvestment there. I think if you can really identify a strong understanding of the broader economic position that we're in and how that informs talent, you can probably have a more grown-up conversation with your CFO, who is saying, you've employed all this AI. This AI looks fantastic. It's saved you loads of time. You need less people on your team. Well, that's not true. We're freeing up the time to go and utilize the skills that we hired those people in talent for in the first place. And we're going to get more efficient at hiring people because they're better at connecting to candidates, stakeholders, leadership. But you really need to be able to communicate that very clearly and actually relate it to the broader market, because that's what people in the C-suite genuinely understand and
yeah,
what they
it feels a little unpredictable right now. Maybe even more so. But if you think about that triangle of economy and workforce planning and hiring, it still feels like there's an awful lot of financial uncertainty right now. Are we where where are the good guys getting it right though in trying to sort of balance the harmony of that triangle? Because it feels like from what you've just sort of said, yep, we've got a workforce plan, we've got some hiring tactics or strategies, and there may be a mix of AI in there, but we're still missing the commercial understanding.
Mm.
How's that come into a department that perhaps hasn't had that at its forefront in the past?
Well, I think I mean, to be fair, at Indeed, we've been talking about this for a long time. I think we
Mm,
were one of the first companies to put economists out there and have economists talk about what's going on from the aspect of hiring. And I think that's really important. So the
mm,
conversation has been surfaced a lot more than it was in previous years. I think generally, if you talk to anybody, I think people are more economically and kind of socially aware than perhaps they were 5 years ago. And broadly, that's a good thing. I think if you look at the recruitment market, the volatility is probably the biggest problem
Yeah.
here. And if you spend time looking at the economic data, you can actually start understanding why you're having difficulty in certain areas. We've got that kind of productivity growth that's stagnated over time. So you need to be making sure that you've got productivity coming into your business. The employment rate's gone down since it was the lowest since 2016 now. So all of that is a set of pressures that are going to be immediately on people that are hiring managers. If you look at the other problems around this, so the wage problem, real wages have only just really recovered to 2008 levels.
Mm.
So again, that's a pressure on hiring. So, if you're not paying enough money, people are going to go and find another job. So when you're looking at your talent plan, you've got to understand, are we actually paying people the right kind of money? Do we understand the availability of talent in a marketplace? Are we actually mapping for the skills that are going to make us profitable in the future? Are we doing all of these things in the right context? So I think people are spending more time looking at things like the hiring lab that we produce at Indeed and other market data out there. And I see pockets of companies that are actually saying, no, this is really important to us. It's not right the way across the board. I think if you look at certain industry sectors, they're probably better at it than others.
Mhm.
That's, I don't want to be glib there. It's quite a broad statement. But I think if you look at people who are in logistics and retail and things like that, high volume hiring, they're really super sensitive to this, and they're really super sensitive to, okay, if there are economic changes, what does that mean to our ability to put people to go and do things like last mile delivery,
Mm.
to cope with churn in retail. Hospitality is also super sensitive to it. I spend a lot of time talking to organizations about what's going on in the wider economy. Our economists will go and do the big macro picture, which is great, but a lot of the kind of so what's in it for me is the kind of conversation that I go off and have with people. And typically that's those that are in the higher volume stuff, because there is so much sensitivity there.
And I guess we've got the influences on the global economy too. We're seeing different countries I mean, the world's getting smaller all the time, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
a workforce now looks very different to what it used to. It's pretty much pan global, isn't it? It's lots of different teams across everywhere. Are there any other influences you sort of see in that help within that triangle, or I don't know, is there anything to learn or to be gained from having that more global view?
I think if you can look at other countries and you can look at their hiring practices, there are obviously some areas where there are higher legislation issues. So if we start thinking about, what is government policy going to look like that might adopt certain policies from other countries, you can actually sit there and say, well, is that going to be a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah.
If you look at some of the things like taxation policy, you can see whether that directly affects the ability to hire. Not to delve into politics here, but we've obviously seen the effects of that very recently. And
One or two little nudges, yeah. Just
yeah,
noticed a couple of things happening.
I ran an event literally a week ago for the largest grocery retailers, and that's front and center. And they're looking at other countries where they're operating and seeing lower taxation, lower barrier to entry, and saying, well, our profits there are going to be significantly more than they are in the UK. So I think that broader understanding of markets, the fact that we do have international businesses rather than very localized businesses, means that people are probably more sensitive to change, and they probably have more of an understanding of what change means for them.
Okay. I want to try and maybe drag it back a bit to AI
Yeah.
to see if I can leave this conversation less foggy, if that's at all possible. I think when we look at AI, I like to think of myself as an optimist, but there's an awful lot of pessimists out there, and particularly thinking around one of the biggest fears around AI is job replacement, or
Mm.
we're all going to be replaced by robots or whatever it is. And yet, if we look ahead to the nirvana that Society 5.0 the picture that paints, that all this AI and tech and automation is going to benefit human beings. We're going to live more lives. We're going to be working a 3-day week. We're going to be forest bathing or whatever the phrase is. What do you see in your space as the kind of like almost immediate realistic future? Are you seeing any of these things coming through? What are some of the bigger things we should take note of?
So let's be realistic here. If you look at the OECD, you look at ONS, you look at all sorts of stuff. The big slogans that have been in newspapers is, there's 8 million jobs in the UK affected by the end of 2025, or jobs at risk, I think is the phrase that is very commonly used. That doesn't mean those jobs are disappearing.
Mm.
What that means is those jobs are changing, and that we need to make sure that we reskill people into the correct jobs. That's not to say that job replacement won't happen. It will happen, but it's not going to happen evenly, and it will probably happen in roles that have got poor support, poor pay, or poor protection. When we're thinking about, what does job protection really look like? So we do have to be very aware that things will change. Things have always changed. I've mentioned many times, I'm sure some of your listeners will have heard this ad nauseum, but my first ever job, I was a fax runner. Physical email. Ran around an office getting notes, then running back to a fax machine, sending them off to people. And when email came in, my job changed and it went away. But so that change has always happened. It's always been there. What we're seeing is the pace of change is probably coming much quicker. But what we're going to do is we will be automating the more repetitive tasks. We're going to augment more creative tasks and more creative thinking. And we're probably going to create new categories of jobs that we can't yet name. I think that's really important. There is the risk in that, AI doesn't take your job, is that the job becomes a bit hollow and you kind of wish that AI had taken your job because you're not really doing that much anymore.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it's the content problem, right? If you look at around the internet, there is so much AI content out there. It's almost overwhelming. You look at the amount of AI art that exists, and now AI art is training itself on AI art, and it looks more and more horrible. That's sort of what could happen with jobs to an extent.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of creativity problem. There is a problem around what's really going to happen here. And things like Society 5.0, it's a great blueprint, but we've got to stop pretending this is automatic. It's not.
Yeah.
It requires work to do this. And I think AI won't remove humans from the workforce. It will probably force us to prove that we're worth keeping. And I think if you circle that back to the kind of recruitment thing, this probably exposes where we had a broken system in the first place. It's probably not going to change the system, but it might go, have you realized how bad this was? And, I'm not going to tell you how to redo it, but it's surfacing that you're doing things poorly. The example that I use a lot is if you've got one recruiter who can fill 500 recs and another recruiter that does 350, the current paradigm would probably be that the person who does 500 gets kept and the 350 person, you probably exit. Well, the 350 person might have all of those people stay for 3 months, 6 months, 5 years. Probably you want someone who can get people to stay a year to 5 years. Great. That 350 person does that. The 500 person gets people to stay for 3 or 6 months and then they exit. So you're at that point of tension where, well, actually, you probably need to look at the skills. You need to look at what they're good at. The person who does 350 recs is probably bad at admin, and it takes them longer to go through that process. So if you automate their process, could they do 500 recs? They arguably could. Is the person who's doing 500 recs doing a good job? Well, you need to go and look at their skills, and you probably need to start repositioning what they're doing in that job. So this is, I think, the really important thing that we should be recognizing now is that there is going to be a process of change, but we really have to work at it. It's not going to remove humans from the workforce en masse, but we need to make sure that we're keeping the right people in the right jobs. We're moving people to other jobs where they might be more effective. That's probably where we need to be.
That's a wonderful little summary at the end of this show, because that's the quickest 30 minutes I've had in a long time. That's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your considerable insights. And it's been really eye-opening to explore this for me personally from another perspective. Just before I sort of say goodbye and let you go, if people want to find out a bit more and find out a bit more about you, where should they go? Where can they find you, Matt?
Well, I'm a terrible lax user of social media, and I'm available on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place to find me. So yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. I promise I will start posting some content again. I don't think I've posted anything this year, which is a bit worrying. I was
You've been
posting
busy.
lots of articles, but yeah, I kind of the whole social media thing is another conversation for another day, Andy.
Another day, my friend. Another day. Listen, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it, Matt. And that's all we've got time for today, folks. So don't forget to visit engageforsuccess.org to check out the show notes and explore all the fabulous free employee engagement resources that we have there. And while you're there, why not download or stream any of the previous shows at your leisure? We'll be back at the same time next week. I'm Eddie Gorham, and thanks for listening to Engage for Success Radio.
Engage for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.